Alright, so paper 1. Let's start with that as soon as it loads up. So what should you do? Paper 1, you guys have what? Exactly 1 hour, but before that you get 5 minutes, right? So what should you do with those 5 minutes? Now, some people will tell you that you should, sit down and read through all the sources, but I strongly disagree with that. Because you get to the questions, you answer question 1 with those sources, and after just reading all the sources, let's say this is on source A, right? Would you remember what exactly source A said by the time you read all the sources? Probably no. And even more definitely, by the time you get to question 2, after answering the first question, you won't really remember what you read in the other sources either, and you'll have to reread them anyway. So the best thing to do really is to go to the question, figure out what question 1 is, first and second part, see what sources they're about, and go to the sources immediately and start answering the question in your head. Then you can immediately, that's the way you can shave off the largest amount of time. And basically, for this part, you should spend around 5 minutes on it, right, for the question 1, because this is very short. Here, you just want to make 3 general points for source E, and then for source D, you want to make 2 general points. The first question will be, of course, about the textual source, and the second one will be about the visual source. It might be a photo, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to be some sort of political cartoon, because that's the IB's favorite thing to put. And you want this to be as succinct as possible. So you go into your answer, right, and you basically just nail down 3 sentences, preferably with short quotes from the source. Which, like, no introduction, nothing. You just tell the examiner straight up what are those 3 conclusions, what are those, what are those 3 things which show the significance of the invasion of Abyssinia for Britain. So you go there and, make it, and you just list them. 1, 2, 3. One after the other, right? And then for source B, you're basically doing the same thing, although you might want to just really shortly describe the symbolism of the source, so that you should show that you know what you're talking about, and since this might be integral for your actual presentation of what the source is saying. So first of all, here you need to find two messages conveyed by source D, right? So first of all, these always come with a caption. So this caption in itself is a message, right? Because it's saying, the leader of Abyssinia, Haile Selassie, is saying, "Have I got this right? He's taken nearly half of what I had, and now your gentlemen want to discuss whether he should take any more." So it's basically, showing this message that the British and the French are not being fair policemen, right? That they're actually, helping support Mussolini's ambitions, or just in general that the League is unfair. But we can also just and you can immediately quote that and put that down. But another thing that's important is just look at the symbolism. Obviously you guys need to know the faces of the most basic people, so you should know how Mussolini looks like, or Wilson looks like, or Haile Selassie looks like. But anyway, Mussolini is dressed as a thug, so the message is that Mussolini is a thug, and his actions are menacing the world order. And we have the French and the British dressed as policemen, so we have the message that the British are trying to present themselves as policemen, but they're actually colluding with Mussolini, as this has told us, right? And then, so there's that. You can also consider, for example, how, perhaps that, they're looking menacingly at Mussolini. So perhaps that, that's one interpretation, that, that they're also trying to put on this show of being against Mussolini while working with him. The other interpretation is that they're standing next to Mussolini because they're actually colluding with him. So that's another interpretation you could put, right? So, even these small visual cues, like that one element, like simply just Mussolini's outfit, that can be enough to make a major point. So, you might find more, but you just want to nail down 2 and get out of there, right? Pretty much the same as the previous question, so those are easy 5 points. Anyway, after that you get to the compare and contrast section. And for the next 2 sections, the compare and contrast plus the OPCVL, you guys should take 25 minutes, 30 minutes max, but you guys should aim for 25, because you want to have 25 minutes left for the mini essay. At least 25, but preferably 30 is better to have. So what do we do for the compare and contrast question? So on the compare and contrast question, you guys need to make it so that there's either 3 similarities and 3 differences, or 2 of one and 4 of the other. If you have 5 differences and 1 similarity, or vice versa, the IB won't accept that. But if you have 4 2, that's perfectly fine for the IB. And what's the way to go about it? Well, simply you have a paragraph on similarities and a similarity on differences. And you also follow this very mechanical format. You know, you're not writing some sort of poetry here. You're trying to make it mechanical so that the examiner can see that you used all the sources and that they check off their checklist, and they have to give you the max amount of points. So that, you know, a lot of times the examiners hesitate. They don't want to give you 6. They want to give you like 5 or like 2 instead of 1, because they don't want to do extremes. So you want to make sure that they have no choice but to give you that 100%. You follow this format. So for similarities, you basically say both source A and C agree that, and then you bring up short quotes to prove it. Because in source A it says X, and in source C it says Y, right? And then in differences, it's pretty much the same. You just say that, like, yeah, they're different because they, let's say, have a different explanation. For example, source A says this, and then you quote it, and then source C says this, and then you quote that. We want this very mechanical format because that basically means peak efficiency for you as a writer, and the most clear message that most closely aligns with the criteria for the examiner. And the problem with this question, because a lot of people struggle with it, I mean almost everybody does really, is because you need to find 6 elements for such, you know, short sources. And the thing is that you guys, you know, you need to find stuff that's implicit, not just explicit. That's important to consider. For an example, if you go to source A, right, it says that but the Hoare-Laval Pact, which broke the unity of and confidence of the League action, was for the Nazis a signal that the way was clear for future advance. It marked the weakness and division of France and Britain. During February 1936, there were many indications of growing sympathy between Germany and Italy. Meanwhile, the German press was full of attacks on Franco-Russian treaty, and the rumor grew that Hitler's next objective would get rid of the demilitarized zone in the Rhineland. And source C says, neither France nor Britain was willing to engage in military hostilities with Italy on behalf of the League. And source C says this explicitly, but source A delivers the same message, but implicitly, because it basically says that Britain and Italy were not willing to go up against Italy in favor of the League. They don't like explicitly say that they were trying to cooperate with Italy, but that's still the message that's delivered when you actually read the message, right? I mean, you guys can see that, I hope. So basically, the key to getting all those 6 differences is being able to find the implicit differences. You also quote them, right? Do you guys hear me? Do you guys?
Yes, we can.
Okay, am I frozen? But like, what's frozen specifically? Because I'm getting a message.
Maybe the paper.
Because I'm not moving it. Can you see me moving it?
Yeah.
Okay, because I could really just click on sources A and C, so I didn't need to move it. So basically, if you guys are still struggling with finding all 6, then really try to just, like, you know, go into those past papers, which, you know, well, I can't support officially on the server using pirated materials, but there are, well, you know, there are many ways to access past papers. Let me leave it off at that. So if you're having trouble with that, just try to identify those implicit things. You also quote them, because if you quote them and explain why it's implicit, then the IB examiner from my panel has a somewhat different interpretation of the source, can no longer deny your reasoning if it's reasonable, right? And if you're specifically quoting it. So that's, you know, why you want to have that down in line. Oh yeah, and one thing that's also important to consider is that under no circumstances do you want to say, well, source A says X, but source C does not mention it at all. That's only something that you put, as a measure of last resort if you absolutely can't figure anything out, because the IB does not really look favorably on that kind of answer. And then we move on to our last question, the OPCVL question. This question is a scam because it only gives you 4 points despite requiring you to make 6 statements. But these are very short, but you can make these very short. Basically, you identify a value of the origin and the limitation of the origin, and the value of the purpose and the limitation of the purpose, and then the value of the content and the limitation of the content, and you make 3 paragraphs just like that. Although you can also organize it by just putting the values first of origin, purpose, and content, and then just the limitations of those 3 in 2 paragraphs. That's an equally fine method. But remember here, you don't have to go into detail. Just make it as short as possible. Just explain the value as shortly as possible for your point to be made. So while this question can take you like 15 minutes, and if you're struggling, the compare and contrast question can even exceed that. The OPCVL question can without a doubt easily be wrapped up in 10 minutes, as long as you guys just practice OPCVL analysis, which I hope by now you guys should understand after 2 years of IB. So now finally the mini essay, right? So first of all, in case you somehow completely F up and you guys are left with like 5 minutes, put anything down. Just even just make like a map, like of your general ideas. Because if you put something down, they'll give you at least 1 point, first of all, and second of all, IB examiners, as I said, don't like extremes, so they'll very rarely give you a 1 or a 9 on something this big, but they might even bump it up to a 2, even if you just just write an introduction or something. And that can be a big deal, because if you nailed all of these questions perfectly or almost perfectly, so you got 16 or 15 points, and then you get 2 points on that essay, or even 1, well, that can even bring up your score from a 5 to a 6. So that can be pretty significant. For example, on this paper, I got like a 20 or 24, which conservatively my teacher gave a 6, but usually that would be a 7 on most exams in most years. But anyway, what's the approach that you should be taking for the mini essay? So obviously, as you guys should know, you need to use all the sources that are provided. And the way that you make sure that you're using all the sources is that you list them in the top right corner, and as you go, you cross them off. And whenever you mention a source, you do it by, applying a quote, and then, putting something in parentheses. And, what's important is having these quotes and bringing up those sources, right? Source A. This basically shows the examiner that you use source A and they can't deny it. They need to check it off too as well, right? So just put A in parentheses or source A in parentheses. And then another thing that you guys should, consider here is that don't care about grammar all that much. If grammatically would be, if the quote doesn't fully fit grammatically but gets the point across sensibly, just put it in, because your guys, as I said, you're not writing some sort of like advanced research paper. You're trying to just nail in these criteria, and they're not judging you on your stylistic choices or on your grammar at all. So yeah, that's the case here. And also, your knowledge needs to be your own knowledge needs to be integrated with the knowledge that they're providing. So basically, you can't do a paragraph where you just quote and put in all quotes from from the sources you have in the paper, and then just do another paragraph based wholly on your own knowledge. You have to integrate the two. So it's like the best way to do this is just do it one sentence of one sentence of the other. So you do one sentence of your own knowledge, and then you do one sentence of something you take from the source. And that's the best way to ensure that you have a good balance and that it's well integrated, and not just separate spheres. And then the IB is going to like that. in terms of the the way that you show your own knowledge is like, you bring up the view of a school, you bring up some sort of agreement or name or date that that's not necessarily from one of the sources. That's how you can demonstrate your own knowledge. A piece of analysis that you've gotten from some school or historian, right? Or like some point on your own that you're not basing off the sources specifically. That's how you demonstrate your own knowledge, right? And generally, the structure I recommend is 2 paragraphs, because you don't have enough time to make, all the. Usually, don't have enough time for 3. So identify what the 2 most important areas are, as if you were writing a paper 1 essay, and then you write it, right? Leaning heavily on the sources, basically. So, assuming. Is this clear? Like, any confusion or any questions about paper 1 from anyone? No. Oh.
No, don't think so.
No. All right then, guys. So, well, as you can see, right, the first 4 questions you can pretty much rate them mechanically. If you know the approach to them, you could do pretty much almost as well if you went ahead and, I don't know, wrote the paper 1 on some other topic. Like, for an example, even the first one with like the medieval rulers or military leaders or whatever. You could still do that pretty effectively, because it's still the same skills for source analysis and finding the points of a source. But if you can nail these down perfectly, then you have 15 or 16 points. And in that situation, then even if you don't do super good on your essay in the end, then at the end of the day, you're still gonna get a good score, right? And like a 5 or a 6, that should be enough for a 7 in most circumstances. So yeah, that's paper 1.